Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. In the spirit of the trees, in the spirit of living nature, with deep gratitude to all the generations before us that have led us to the present moment, I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we commence day 3 of a 5-day program on the crisis and challenges of democracy. As you've all no doubt been following the House of Representatives hearings on the January 6th insurrection. Just yesterday, there were hearings on how Donald Trump and his allies in the White House and in the Republican Party were orchestrating a coercive attempt at the level of the various states that they wanted to focus on, like Georgia and Wisconsin, Arizona, New Mexico, to get them to produce false slates of electors that would enable the vice president to determine that the election had been fraudulent and throw our constitutional process in the United States into disarray, which would allow Donald Trump to maintain his grip on power. It didn't take place, largely because Republican officials, like the Secretary of State in Georgia, for example, and in other states, sworn to protect the Constitution in the face of an attempted coup, stood firm. And it was only because of the integrity of specific individuals in specific areas of responsibility throughout the United States, reinforced by over 50 court cases, which unanimously determined that the coup attempt was fraudulent, that our democracy was preserved. So inherent in what has been revealed, which is still going on, is both the concerted attempt to subvert democracy and the extraordinary heroism of individual after individual who refused point blank to take part. And that is a microcosm of what is not only transpiring, but the dialectic, generation by generation, that plays itself out in the preservation of democracy. It was Thomas Jefferson over 250 years ago that said that it's each generation that needs to preserve through eternal vigilance the democratic institutions generation by generation. And we are going through that in our own way in this generation, 246 years later. And what is at stake, given the strategic intent of many forces in the United States, is to preserve it once again. So that is our subject for this week. It turns out it's coterminous with the hearings in the House of Representatives. So this is a very live discussion. This is happening in real time. This is not academic. And so we are delighted today to bring to your attention various individuals who are literally on the front lines of the preservation of democracy as we know it. Before we jump into this noble discussion, let us pause, as we always do, as we commence our Humanity Rising sessions, and just take a moment to center yourselves in your bodies, and the realizations that we are nature made conscious. Close your eyes if you can and center your attention on your heart. And for the next 60 seconds or so, in a spirit of gratitude and thanksgiving that we're all alive at this most extraordinary moment in the human journey. let us feel solidarity to all those in this discussion and all those not only in the United States, but around the world that are giving their hearts to preserving democracy as we know it. Thank you, everyone. Now it's my pleasure to bring back to our discussion the conveners, John and Margot in Boulder, George Cappannelli in Santa Fe, who are activists who've been working quite literally their entire adult lives to make democracy more vibrant and more inclusive, which is the best way to guarantee its ongoing viability. So John, George, welcome back. They'll say a few words of context and introduction, and then I'll circle back and introduce some of the panelists in our program today. George, John.
Thanks, Jim. Not going to say much. You've covered some really critical ground. Just letting those of you who are joining us for the first time know that this is part of an ongoing series called the Democracy Dialogues. We convened it for all the reasons Jim said. We're in trouble as a democracy. And our job, in our belief, is to shine a spotlight on people that are doing extraordinary stuff all across the country to do what needs to be done, and that is to eliminate the bullshit and the big lies and all the rest of that and get to some core understandings, not only about what they're doing and how we can help them, but what we can do individually as citizens. In addition to the quote that Jefferson gave that Jim indicated, Jefferson said something else, that when we, the people, stop paying attention to civic affairs, then governors and legislators and judges and all the rest, and now we can certainly add ex-presidents to that list, all become wolves. So we have a job, a responsibility, an obligation, in my opinion, to show up, to support all of these incredibly courageous and noble people that have been and continue to do really important work in the trenches, on the front lines, making a difference. And between now and November, it is our hope that we can encourage you, if you have not begun to truly support what needs to happen to preserve democracy in November. We hope you'll begin. And we hope today will give you more ammunition and more understanding of why that needs to happen. John, do you want to say anything here at the outset?
The only thing I'd say is that Kit and Danny and Harvey Wasserman, who we hope to have on, have been at this since the 60s nonstop. And there are a lot of people who showed up in the 60s, and a relatively small amount have continued their work for progressive and social justice causes and peace causes really through an entire lifetime. And we are privileged to have three such people with us today.
Jim.
Thank you, John. Thank you, George. And now, Danny Sheehan and Kit Bricka, if you'll just turn on your videos and join us. I want to first introduce Kit, who I've known, boy, it must been 40 years. And when I first met him at the State of the World Forum back in the 1990s, Kit was full of fire for human rights, was working at the time to preserve the life of a Nigerian activist, unsuccessfully as it turned out. But Kit Bricka is one of those people, as John said, who's been on the front lines, literally, decade by decade, and has never stopped, and is one of those heroes, I would say, of our time and for the preservation of democracy as we know it. Dan Sheehan is also a very old friend of mine that I met back during our Harvard days in the 70s, actually, and had just come out of Harvard Law as a constitutional litigator. And the cutting edge that Danny has been on, again, for decades, has been on how do you, in the courtroom, as well as through public education, how do we preserve democracy? He was involved in the Pentagon Papers. He was involved in the Watergate. He was at Wounded Knee. He was involved in the Karen Silkwood case. And most of the cases over the last 50 years that have, one way or another, through the court system, preserved democracy, the free press, the right of journalists to speak out, the right of activists to bring information to the public, have involved in one way or another Dan Sheehan. And it's been my privilege to know both Kit and Danny over the years, and to be able to bring them into this conversation today. And I'd like to start, gentlemen, first with you, Danny, and then Kit, on just what your evaluation is. How are you understanding what's going on with the hearings back in Washington and the revelations around this ongoing coup attempt that we see literally unfolding before our very eyes on, public TV? So Danny, you first, and then Kit, just tell us how you're feeling and how you're evaluating what's going on.
Well, Jim, this is clearly an extraordinary moment in our history. We've all together lived through a number of them. We all remember the major turmoil of 1968, with the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. in April, and the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, in June, on the very first day of our exams at Harvard Law School, at our entering class. And that period was extraordinarily tumultuous with the actual assassination of the, probably the leading contender for the Democratic Party nomination for president with Robert Kennedy. We lived, of course, through the assassination of President Kennedy in 1963, which there was no doubt whatsoever that for those who know most about it, that was a coup, an attempt to stop the democratic functioning of our government, because in that case, President Kennedy, was getting set to reverse a major foreign policy initiative of the Central Intelligence Agency in Southeast Asia, among others. Very importantly, he was involved in, President Kennedy was involved at that time with President Khrushchev in the Soviet Union to try to disassemble the nuclear weapons of both countries, as Jim, you and I remember, of our work together on the nuclear weapons issue. And he was assassinated, not by some one single crazed gunman, as we know, but by a coalition of forces that did not favor democracy. They were an elite power group that wanted to stop the people from actually manifesting their intentions through their popular activities. We've lived through other periods, those of us actually all here, a bunch of gray-haired people that, back during the McCarthy era. We were younger at that time, but that was an extraordinary time when the forces of reaction were engaged in destroying the lives of people all the way from inside government agencies and in the State Department and others, and in destroying the lives of professors at universities. And that what we're looking at now is another period of this extraordinary reaction on the part of reactionaries that are one of the octave of major worldviews that our human family has. That there's a dialectic that you referred to, Jim, earlier, that has been at play here in our democracy here on the North American continent, right from the very inception of our Constitution. The forces that were led by Alexander Hamilton, the mercantile class, the financial class, the elite, well-educated people, wealthy people at that time, wanted to have a government that was very similar to the governments of Europe, with an elite aristocratic minority governing the resources and the policies of our nation. On the other hand, James Madison and Jefferson and Aaron Burr and some others, were actively involved in trying to increase access to the decision-making process on the part of regular people. And they were espousing a natural law philosophy that they had learned. Many of them had been trained at the College of New Jersey, which later became Princeton, by Reverend John Witherspoon, in the understanding of natural law, that each individual human being was endowed by their creator intrinsically and inherently to possess the rights of individual decision-making in their own lives, and their right to participate in the collective decision-making. And this dynamic has been going on in our country for 246 years. And what we see happening now, in my closing initial remarks here, is that this reactionary element, the Proud Boys, the right-wing white supremacists, the nativists, that these people are being manipulated. I make no doubt about it. This is a manipulation that is going on of these rather primitive, fear-filled, reactionary elements on the part of a much more sophisticated elite, one that is, in a sense, represented by Donald Trump, a would-be billionaire, a mercantilist that perceives everything in terms of finances and money and power on the part of a tiny minority. That's what we're really faced with here in the entire progressive movement that has been operational in our country now for 246 years, longer than that, actually before the actual founding of our Constitution, has been in dialectical struggle with this minority element. And that is what's happening right now. So I just want people to keep in mind that the adversaries that we're engaged with here are not the kind of people with clubs and white supremacists, Confederate flags and racist remarks about hanging the vice president. That these people are kind of a reactive, low consciousness element in our community that are easily manipulated by these much more sophisticated forces, and that we need to keep an eye on that throughout this entire period that we're going through, to realize who the actual adversaries of democracy are. And they are this tiny elite that want to bend all of the institutions of our government to their own private self-interests, primarily organized through the private shareholder business corporation that has been operative since the end of the American Civil War in our country. So I just want to make that point so that we keep a proper perspective on who the actual adversaries are in this dialectic against democracy.
Thank you. We'll circle back to that. That's a very rich opening statement, Danny. Thank you. There are layers and layers of what's happening, and what we see with the Proud Boys and so forth. There is just the outer edges of the onion, and it goes back much more deeply into the core itself. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. Kit, what would be your perspective on what's going on?
Well, thank you. And just building on what you laid out, Jim, and you, Danny, on the historical perspective, how we survived the several time challenges we've had, those of us here in our lifetime, has been an extraordinary thing when you look at it. It really depends this time around on several elements. Very important is the activism of those of us who are older, together with the younger generation, together with the environmental justice community, to come up, face and win against this white nationalist minority movement, which has a lot of influence. We, you painted that picture of the assassination of Bobby Kennedy. We all remember him in the hotel, and one of those last photos was Dolores Huerta on one side, Rosie Greer on the other side, right before he went in the kitchen, was assassinated. Dolores is still among us, and very gratefully, she's our full partner with Romero Institute and the work that we're doing. We also had whistleblowers. Well, we remember, the importance of the Daniel Ellsberg and the Pentagon Papers that Danny also worked on. It's going to take a lot of elements, including those. And it's interesting that within the oil corporations, within the health and safety corporate class of people doing the work of cleaning up all the messes of these corporations, there are individuals that are extremely committed to, from within the inside, doing all the best they can, not just as whistleblowers, but as people who are actively trying to make change, that are potential allies. So we're going to need an interesting confluence of allies to come together here. It's, of course, I think wise that the hearings chose to simply interview all the Republicans around Donald Trump to make this legal case to the public. I mean, what are you going to say? It's also no surprise to me that the ardent Trumpists, it doesn't reach them. As Danny says, you can fool some of the people all the time, all the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. I guess it was Abe Lincoln. And Danny says that 18% of the population that are those forces, those are the people that you can fool all the time, because they've bought into the lie so deeply that they can't see beyond that lens or that worldview. So we're not going to get them, but there's 4/5 of us out there to organize. So what I am spending as an activist all my time doing is working with the people who have solutions. So working with the Romero Institute and the Dolores Huerta Foundation, seeking to empower. And if you haven't had them on yet, those people that were responsible in Georgia for the 95% African-American turnout. I'm talking Ray McClellan, Andrea Miller, who have rebranded the Georgia Miracle as the Georgia Way. They said it wasn't a miracle, it was relational grassroots organizing. And they're now taking on the entire Southern Crescent. And if they had more money, they'd take on Midwest states, because they have the organizing formula of how to do it. These are real heroes who people need to understand and need our support. What's going on, it's heartening to hear the election in Colombia and a possible election in Brazil. But Colombia, the new president and vice president are surrounded by these forces. They are nowhere out of the woods. They're still in extreme danger. And if they continue to live, they may not see progress because they're surrounded by these same forces. So it's a whole global, as Danny says, there are layers and layers, and it's a whole global movement. And I like to have the perspective that, of course, we can expect this from people who align with white nationalists. Of course, we can expect this kind of resistance from the old order that's dying. When I listened to the new president-elect down there, he said it was useful. As a man who came out of M16, who came out of the armed struggle to then get involved in civic society and spoke eloquently about the effectiveness of nonviolence. He said, you know, left and right was useful back then. That's his perspective. He said, I frame it now as life versus death, life forces versus death forces. And that's a useful lens. I think left and right is still useful in certain circumstances as well. But those of us that are supporting all life, and I'm going to be tomorrow in Sacramento at the California Air Resources Board, which is one of the most powerful agencies, which actually has the power to determine the timeline. We're talking about carbon zero for California by 2030. They're still talking 2035. And as I said last time, anyone working on any of these issues has to have the voices and the images in themselves, if they really want to do a good job, of those that aren't in the room. The next 7 generations, young people, the voices of the atoms of methane under the tundra, you know, with 70 degrees Fahrenheit above normal at the South Pole, watching it all and saying, talking to us and saying, if you really don't want us out to do who we are and poison you and burn you up and take your lives, well, get with it. I mean, you know, don't let us out. You know, we need the voices of the 4 worlds, not just this human world, you know, the plants, the animals, and the minerals. And we need the 4 elements, the voices of the air. You know, what we're doing, you know, we are killing ourselves with the toxicity in the air. And there, anyway, so all these voices have to be in the room in consciousness with those of us that have that consciousness and actually give voice to those voiceless voices as well as the human voices. So I'll leave it at that for now.
So, Kit, and you know, as I listen to you, as I look with respect at the incredible work that both of you have done, and Danny and Harvey, who's not here and we're still hoping will find his way to join us. My question really is, we understand the mechanism of government is badly in disarray, broken in many instances. And we know that there are terrific people all over the country and all over the world that are doing their best to step up in this moment, or have been stepping up for decades. How do we get the people of the United States back involved, not just in this conversation, but in doing the things that their rights give them the right to do? Danny, you're on mute, I think.
Yeah. Thank you, George. It's important to recognize there's a famous Irish aphorism. Jim and Tatanka have both heard me say it a number of times. But there's the Irish, as you know, refer to Ireland as the old sod, and that there's an old saying that says well, the old sod, it isn't what it used to be, but then it never was. And it's really important to understand that this long struggle to try on both hands to get the people involved in the actual decision-making process and to confront effectively the people that are trying to hold them out of the decision-making process has been going on for a very long time. It's been very difficult to get the average person to believe that she or he can really make any difference, because they're taught, they're in high school civics or in their grade school civics, you know, that there are these leaders that we rely upon and we respect, and you know, and that they will help make decisions on our behalf for us. And really, basically, all you really need to do is come out and vote, you know, once every 4 years or so. And that the participation of the average person in the country is to come out and vote only once every 4 years. And even at that point, we only get approximately even at the high water mark, you only get about 60% of the people that come out to vote. So 40% of the people, don't even vote. And so that there's an extraordinary effort that needs to be undertaken to get to the average citizens on the part of organizers to inspire these people to actually participate. We know that there's going to be this constant effort on the part of the elite in the would-be aristocracy to hold them out of power, the people out of power. But we need to realize that we can't become over pessimistic about the nature of what we're confronted by here. The lethargy on the part of a lot of people to vote in the active effort to suppress them, on the other hand, that our job is to be upward, positive, forward, to work in a positive way to get to as many of the average people as we can and make it clear to them that their own interests and the interests of their children and grandchildren require them to do more than just vote once every 4 years. They need to be more aggressive, and we need to help people understand what the different steps are that they can take to participate of community meetings, of going to their local town council meetings, going to their state legislative meetings. I mean, this is a job. The work of citizenship is one that we have to inspire people to want to engage in. So in that sense, you have to make it entertaining, you have to make it fun, you have to make it affirming, and we have to get over being a spectator nation. We have to get people actively involved. And so that a lot of the work we need to do is in the schools, where very young people are, on the college campuses, et cetera. So we've got to try to get at the young people. The Sunrise movement is an extraordinarily positive movement that's going on right now. All of us need to concentrate on trying to establish alliances with young people to get them involved. We're the boomers here. Virtually all of us are baby boomers. And we got confronted by the Vietnam War, basically. The men and women's brothers and lovers and fathers were being drafted to go to fight, 8,000 miles away in the jungles. And we rose up and said, what is this all about? Who is it that's interests are being served here to go do this? And so we were conscientized by that trauma. What we need to do is we can't rely upon super crises threatening people's lives in order to get them mobilized. So what I'm saying is we need to understand that it's always been a struggle to get regular people actively involved in their community decision making. And so we've got to focus on grassroots organizing, public education, in inspiring people to move forward. If we can get enough people to move forward in a massive wave of public activity in this, the other side will yield to it. They may resort to violence upon occasion, but the fact of the matter is, if there are enough of us actively involved and adequately trained and educated to how to exercise our authority and power in a democracy, it can work. And that's what we really need to focus on, and an upward, positive, forward momentum, and not get trapped in the dialectic of just focusing on the bad guys, and trying to either imprison them or do other things. We need to do our job as citizens.
Danny, just a quick follow-up. What organizations would you point to who are doing that basic grassroots organizing, and some of them really working in concert together?
Well, the Tatanka made reference to them, the people that were active in Georgia. We at the Romero Institute, we have a Lakota People's Law Project. We have offices up in Rapid City and up in North Dakota. We were very active in helping Native American people get registered to vote and to vote. For example, in Arizona, if you look at the map in Arizona, the red-blue distinctions there, that what you'll see is that in the state of Arizona, the pockets of voters who voted for Biden and voted for Sinema, the actual Democratic Senate candidate, were basically all on the reservations. These areas coincide with the reservations. That was an extraordinarily effective movement on the part of the Native people. And when the runoff became evident was going to be necessary in Georgia, we shifted our telephone banking that was based up in North Dakota down into Georgia. So we were actively involved and became extraordinarily impressed with the people that were organizing down in Georgia, the Georgia Way. That specific group of people that Tatanka was referring to has been extraordinarily effective. In Dolores Huerta, in her foundation, out in Bakersfield in California, has been extraordinarily effective in dealing on the grassroots level to get people actively involved. And there are many others, but it's that focus on regular people. It's extraordinary when you get down into the actual neighborhoods with people and go to their meetings, their PTA meetings, their veterans club meetings, their Kiwanis club meetings, Rotary meetings. The people are actually quite excited about having people come to them and talk with them and get them interested in specific activities. We have to do that. One of the challenges we have, and I'll close on this one, is that those of us who, in our generation, the boomer generation, have all gone off to college and gotten educated, we've been trained there to how to work with the elite. How to, engage in what they call vanguard theories of social change, go to the court system and get the elite judges to agree with you and get rulings, or get to know the people in the legislature and, go to the same clubs where they are and learn how to lobby them, et cetera. Yeah, we've encountered it here with the Let's Green California bill. There's actually resistance on the part of the state legislators to have us go down and actually mobilize the regular people. They think that it interferes with their kind of machinations on the statewide level of, who's running for the president pro tem, who's going to be the new leader of the assembly. That world they try to draw you into to become participant in that elite decision making. And the minute you start talking about going down into particular districts and potentially unseating some reluctant legislator, these people start to freak out, And so what I'm saying is we have to understand that until our people are in the streets, in the meetings, coming to city council meetings, coming to state legislative meetings, coming to courtrooms to sit in the audience and put public pressure on what has to get done. The elite are going to do what it is what turns out to be in the interests of those who finance their elections. And that tends to be corporate power. So we've got to mobilize our people on the grassroots level and get used to, again, going back out among the people and working with them, being in their meetings, listening to what they want done. It's the old Alinsky, it's the old Saul Alinsky organizing strategy. Get down with the people, understand what it is they want, work with them to assist them in exercising their own power, and work shoulder to shoulder with them. And the labor unions are an extraordinary important part of this. The labor union movement. But I think what we really need to do is we need to rekindle something analogous to the Chautauqua movement that was actually generated, back in 1870s, started mobilizing in response to the robber barons. The robber barons were running roughshod over the country from 1868 to 1898, and what happened is the churches The National Board of Homeland Ministry of the United Methodist Church started organizing people and setting up the Chautauqua movement. It generated the labor union movement. It generated the women's suffrage movement. It generated the original environmental movement. It generated the anti-child labor movement. These came out of a concrete, aggressive organizing movement. And so I think what we really do is need to give rebirth to, in fact, the Chautauqua movement of generating a new progressive era, and basically take over the structures of the Democratic Party, with people like, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and, people of the younger generation. That's what we really need to do at the elite level, but we need to work with the people in the grassroots to support that kind of a progressive movement, because it is to benefit the interests of the regular people.
Thanks, Danny.
You have a comment?
Yeah, well, I'll fill in some of the blanks there. We all know the Margaret Mead quote, never doubt it's a small group of people, committed citizens that can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. We need to remember that. It's not going to take everyone. As we create this movement, we have to remember who we are now. We had all that energy when we were young. We still have a good deal of it, but it's not the same. And we're elders. And I think the model is Dolores for us, because I know when we were having an 85th birthday that our mutual friend here, Mike Olmsted, agreed to do down in the Hollywood Bowl. One idea was pass the torch, right? Dolores was furious. I'm not ready to pass the torch. We can share the torch. So, we need that. We need an alliance of our generation with the younger generation. We need to create a coalition. We see it happening. We have well over 100 organizations now. You can feel it in the Senate when the representative of the electrical workers spoke up and said, I support this bill, SB 1230 that Danny and Romero created. John Laird had swung around and said, wow, well, never saw that before. It's the work behind the scenes of the labor and environmental getting together. So in remembering that, when you build a coalition, I love at a gathering, Angela Davis said over in the East Bay, the annual Mario Savio Award, and she was on a panel, and she was talking about coalition building. And she said, if you're really, really feeling good and really comfortable and really in your zone and think you're doing coalition building, you're not. I mean, there will be part of that, but there has to be a lot of discomfort because you're working with people that don't, that you don't normally hang out with and don't agree with you. And she reminded us when she was in jail, how important it was that she got out of jail, free Angela. Do you know who put the bail money up? It was a white conservative Fresno farmer that put the bail money up. That's a coalition. Okay, so we're going to have allies, and we have to have, the old look. You hate the evil, but you accept, as human, the evil builder. So Sunrise, get out, and Sunrise is active. They now have Zooms. You can actually go to Zooms. You couldn't for a while because they were just dealing with their, high school and college kids. I'm involved with those Zooms right now. They had an event at San Jose State where they marched. I showed up. There was about 7 of us elders and about 120 young people, mainly women, African-American, Asian, Latino, white. And they held an event at Cesar Chavez Park. And believe me, Ro Khanna showed up, the DA showed up, everybody running for office showed up with these, and they were high school kids. The elders were the college kids, okay? These were high school kids. So around that energy and making those alliances, LPLP, as Danny said, New York Times credited Lakota People's Law Project work in Arizona for swinging the election, okay? The new organizations, I'm working with a new organization, National Progressive Action Coalition. This is designed to get progressive movements out of their silos so that we don't have another Mansion Cinema event. And it's multi-generational, multi-ethnic. We we haven't even come out. That our launch will be at the LULAC meeting in Houston around the Roe v. Wade issue in August. Small groups of people. And then, you know, on my wish list, part of our allies, and I've been saying this for years, I just haven't found the right in yet. I've got them with 49ers, but I've been following the Warriors ever since Steph Curry got there. The management model they have and the leadership development they have is a model, not just for corporations, it's a model for the movement. You know, they have a hierarchy of accountability, but they have a circle, and every single person is important. And you get the selflessness that comes from the leader that goes on down. And the people that enter that organization, yes, they're vetted for certain qualities, but they all rise. So we need to really understand that the 49ers just didn't pop up with their winning season in San Francisco, that the Giants didn't win 3 pennants accidentally, that the Warriors just didn't pop out of nowhere. Our culture here, with the history of our movements and with the out-of-the-box thinking of Silicon Valley, created a culture where you have all these amazing, improbable things that happen because we're a step ahead of everyone else. As Danny likes to say, you know, what's the saying about California?
Is that we in California are just like the rest of the United States, only sooner.
So anyway, you know, you can kind of own up to that. But so though it's incumbent on us to actually get a little bit out of our comfort zone and go hang out with the groups of people that we want to be involved. You know, take it on personally. And if you don't know how to do that, call Danny, call me, call Dolores. And, you know, there's a film out on the draft resistance. I'm a Vietnam draft resistor. The Boys Who Said No. If you haven't seen it. The film on Dolores, produced by Carlos Santana, called Dolores. If you haven't seen it, please see it. I mean, who else would have picked up that Dolores' real love of music, you know, is jazz. So the soundtrack is jazz. If you haven't seen Warrior Woman, which is the story about Madonna Thunderhawk of the Lakota People's Law Project. And lastly, I'll say, I made my contribution with Romero through Tatanka's living room. Now, how did this happen? This was, I realized when I was in Santa Cruz for a few years and I hadn't played the piano, I really had to play the piano. I'm a musician. And so I rented the Resource Center for Nonviolence, and I did it just for me. And I invited 6 people and they invited friends, and it was 18 people. And it grew and it grew, and we had a potluck, and then I invited other musicians. So that was a cultural experience where people, and it was always a benefit for Romero through all these years. And I did it either monthly or quarterly. When COVID came, you know, June 20th, 2020, what was it? Where are we? Yeah, 2020. Just turned the mic over to Danny, and he was doing the weekly, and then we spawned this thing that we do. And so I still work weekly, and I'm kind of like bring community people together. And that happened because, get how that happened. That happened because I needed to play the piano and have an audience. That's how it started. You know, it was artistic. And people were drawn because it was the artists having, you know, a progressive point of view, and there was nothing like it. And then that morphed back into the politics. So we need to find what people love, and all that has to be integrated into our movement. That was the beauty of working with the farm workers, which I did for 4 years. You could find everything in life inside that movement. You could get married inside it. You could have kids inside it. You could do regenerative farming inside of it. You could start a radio station inside of it. You could do everything inside the movement. And that's what we need. We need to have an expansive view that is fun, that is multi-generational, that's multi-ethnic. And that's what we're building. And that's where I get my juice.
Let's shift to Linda. Linda, welcome. Good to see you. Would you be willing to introduce yourself and then join in the conversation?
Sure. I'm Linda Seeley from Los Osos, California, which is about 7 miles from the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. And the reason I'm here today is because my organization, San Luis Obispo Mothers for Peace, has been opposing Diablo Canyon since 1973. And now we are faced with a new existential threat to all of us, not only in California, but in the nation, about this false dialogue or monologue, I guess it is, about reviving nuclear power plants, and especially in my case, the Diablo Canyon power plant that's scheduled to shut down by 2024, one unit, and the other unit 2025. And what has happened is that this is so perfect because it's for this group of people, this is a living example of the need for organization and for multi-generational organization. There has been a false narrative that's been, it started a couple of years ago, kind of stealthily, about how great nuclear power is and how it's a green, carbon-free source of generation of power. Well, for a few years, a nuclear power plant doesn't have a lot of carbon associated with it. In the years that it's running and hopefully not blowing up or melting down. And so, as you all know, there's an effort to, there's a new, what's it called, a handout from the Department of Energy to prop up nuclear power plants that are about to shut down. And they've allotted $6 billion to keep aging nuclear power plants going beyond their license date. The Department of Energy has, and this was to prop up nuclear power plants that were failing financially. But Diablo Canyon, because it's a utility, a publicly, what do you call it, regulated utility, does not qualify for the funds, for the $6 billion in funds that the DOE is handing out. So it clearly doesn't qualify because it's not financially strapped, because PG&E is, whatever they want, they get through the Public Utilities Commission, and we're paying for the overage in the costs of how much the electricity at Diablo costs to produce over renewables. Anyway, so what has happened is on board have climbed Senator Feinstein recently, President Biden, of course, Governor Newsom initiated the whole thing by writing a letter to the Department of Energy saying, well, we know Diablo Canyon doesn't qualify, but how about changing the rules for us so that our financially stable corporation can be assisted to even be more financially stable and make even more toxic waste. So we don't know quite yet how it's going to turn out, but we sure have a lot of suspicion and pretty much conviction that they will change the rules to accommodate Diablo Canyon, and and PG&E will apply for the funds, and they will be given. And then what are we left with? We're left with a nuclear power plant that's built on 4 active earthquake faults with 2,000 metric tons of highly radioactive nuclear waste sitting at the intersection of these earthquake faults. And there's 1.6 million pounds of radioactive waste sitting on the coastline in cans that look like bowling pins, vulnerable to terrorist attack and earthquake. And we don't need the power from Diablo Canyon to prevent the blackouts that were the main reason that Governor Newsom started this whole folly, because we have we're discarding renewable energy right and left and stopping because this is such a complicated subject. But so Diablo Canyon has what they call a baseline power load, or a base load, which is 2.2 megawatts 2,200 megawatts of.
Linda, let me just ask you one thing in the interest just of the conversation.
Okay.
Just a good summary, and then we can
Okay.
go forward.
What we need is to get our anti-nuclear movement is composed of people like you and me. The nuclear industry has done a fine job of convincing the young people that nuclear power is fine. It's carbon free, no worries. They don't talk about the waste. They don't talk about the earthquakes. And so in this moment of complete desperation because of climate chaos, its impending doom, people are willing to go with about anything that they think could possibly avert certain disaster.
Right.
And so that's how they framed this argument around Diablo Canyon. And it's wrong. It's not only wrong, it's extraordinarily dangerous.
Right.
So,
Well, can I pop in real quick?
Sure. Hi, Harvey.
So in this whole fantasy that nuclear power, in the broad sense, fights global warming, which is complete insanity, there's a small detail, which is the actual reactors. There are about 400 reactors worldwide. There are 92 in the United States that are licensed. We just shut, thank God, the Palisades reactor in Michigan within the past month. 2 days ago, the New York Times ran a major piece. And the New York Times has been very pro-nuclear. And they ran a piece with the small detail that about half the reactors in France are shut for various technical problems. France has been the so-called poster child for the nuclear power industry. They have about 55 reactors or thereabouts. And they went standard. There's two sizes, Westinghouse reactors, roughly half and half. One's 900 megawatts, one's 1,300 megawatts. The problem is you have these actual pieces of equipment. And if something goes wrong in one reactor in France, they have to look at all of them because it's a standard design. So they had this thing a few years ago called vessel head penetration cracking, where they had cracks where the fuel rods came in and the control rods came in. And then they had to look at all the reactors, and by God, all the reactors had the same problem. So here in the United States, you've got these people running around saying nuclear power is the answer to global warming, but that is a theoretical construct. And as Linda knows all too well, you've got these pieces of equipment, and their average age is 39 years old. The youngest reactor in the United States is Watts Bar in Tennessee, which opened in 1994, but where construction began in 1974, for God's sakes. So I'm sure all of your listeners, everybody tuned in, is driving a 39-year-old car. And that's what we've got. We've got a fleet of 92 39-year-old reactors, each of them with their own particular problems. They all have workforces that are retiring. There's a serious shortage of skilled help in the nuclear power industry. At Diablo Canyon, like all the other ones, you have quirks. Anybody who's driving an old car knows you got little things you got to do here and there that are not generic. And there's all sorts of little things you got to kick. And this one's got glue over here, and here's a Band-Aid over here. It's terrifying. The question is not anything to do with generic safety. The question is, which of the next reactors is going to blow up? That's the question here. And they're seeing it in spades in France right now, and it's happening in the United States, but they're not talking about it. So there you go.
Let me
I
just
think
jump in here.
the point is that this is a potential thing to mobilize people around. That the general discussion that we're having is, what is it that we need to do to kind of mobilize citizenry to become involved in the public policy discussion? And we had used the example that back in the Vietnam era, people were getting murdered and killed and drafted and sent across the seas. Now we've got these various problems, including global climate change, but the nuclear issue is another one of them. There's a whole bunch of issues that people can see in a very short term are affecting them adversely. And we need to get people empowered to respond to this, not feel helpless. That's the key to get back on track of the discussion of why it's so important to protect democracy and to expand the availability of democracy in our country.
And
Let me just interject. Harvey, let me just interject to introduce you. Harvey had some technical issues, but this is Harvey Wasserman, everyone. He's written a number of books on US history from a progressive point of view, but he's also credited as being one of the founders of the anti-nuclear movement and the no nukes movement. You'll notice no nukes on his t-shirt today. So Harvey has deep experience going all the way back to the 1970s in terms of resistance against nuclear power, and has been very active on that particular front line. But I think Danny is bringing in the right point here for this discussion, and that is how the nuclear movement is a portal to empowering people to exercise their democratic rights in the face of corporate and political elites that, for whatever sets of reasons, as Linda pointed out, with the Diablo Canyon reactor, just want to have it just continue way past its use date. So that's where we are. But I noticed that Kit Bricca has raised his hand and wants to jump in as well. So Kit, why don't you make your statement, and then Harvey, we can circle back to you.
Thank you.
Well, very briefly, I mean, the young people don't have any memory because they're too young. Those of us that are older, it's the same old recycled argument, same old, same old. It was marketed as too cheap to meter. And the waste, we've got a solution, which included blasting it up into space, et cetera. There is no solution. So we need to blast through that, and we need to use it to organize. As far as I'm concerned, organizing for climate change and organizing to fight voter suppression are two sides of the same coin. We're mobilizing people in the political process in what the Romero and Dolores Huerta Foundation is doing. A year ago, they were saying, who are these people? They don't know California politics. Today, Romero is a player in Sacramento. And all this energy that's coming in is energy that can and will be used to hold people to the fire and will be used to get out the vote. So it's all part of a greater thing. And the threat to our democracy is, as we know, absolutely extreme. Depends a lot on what happens in November. So, it is a coup still in process of happening, which is what they're reminding us on the hearings. It's a coup in search of a legal theory, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah. Welcome, Harvey. I'm glad you made it.
Well, the time was, I had the wrong time. Anyway, I thought you guys started at 9. Anyway, here we are. And Tatanka has it 100% right. Danny, it's great to see you, and Linda. The other thing, and I'm sorry if you've mentioned this, but I will repeat it because it's worth repeating. By the way, speaking of old times, I saw Bonnie Raitt last night at the Beacon Theater in New York, and anybody wants a great excursion, she is magnificent. It's amazing she can perform at the level she's still performing. It's fantastic. So what has happened with the energy issue in general, and of course, so much of our democracy and need for democracy is defined by energy, including this war in Ukraine, which has totally and energy war, is that we're in the middle of the most significant technological transition in human history in many ways in terms of energy. The bottom line is that Diablo Canyon is losing $3.5 million a day. The power that's generated by almost all the nuclear plants in the United States is significantly over market. And all these so-called free market people, even Milton Friedman will be flipping in his grave to see the continued operation of atomic energy. It's a money loser. And the flip side is that Tatanka and Danny and Linda are so thoroughly enmeshed in California in flipping our economy to renewable energy. And the great miracle of the past 40 years technologically, since we started in the 70s with no nukes, is that wind and solar have actually blown through all expectations. They are enormously cheap and clean and safe. And the reality is that we have upwards of 800,000 people in this country who are employed in the wind, solar, battery, and efficiency industries. In California alone, we have 70,000 people working in wind and solar. That's more people than are working in coal in the entire United States. So we are, and one of the reasons that the establishment is so desperate to stop democracy is that we have the tools to put the coal, what I call King Kong, coal, oil, nukes, and gas. We have the tools to put them out of business. And in an actual free market, fossil and nuclear fuels would be done. So in California, we are now forced to fight to preserve the ultimate democratization key in energy, which is rooftop solar. We are in a position now economically to put panels on every rooftop in the country. And when we do that, we will undermine the power of what's a lot of what's behind this anti-democracy stuff, which is the coal, oil, nuke, and gas industries. Who is killing everything in the U.S. Senate? It's the senator from coal, which is a completely obsolete, Joe Manchin from West Virginia. And it's critical in the deal that was cut in Diablo in 2016 to shut the 2 reactors. There's money to convert the workforce to renewable energy. And that's why we're getting hammered so hard to kill democracy in large part because, the fossil nuclear industry can't let go. I mean, who is Putin? Putin is a gas and oil guy. And the war in Ukraine is about gas and oil, as was the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. So we have to look at the interlock now of energy and democracy. It's absolutely critical. The big breakthrough that Tatanka and Danny and Linda are making in California is we're finally flipping the unions. The unions are finally moving towards solar. I wrote an article in 1976 that the sheet metal workers were moving towards solar, and suddenly the guy who was running the sheet metal workers was thrown out of office. And we're facing this all over. So there's a serious economic and ecological dimension to the overthrow of democracy. And it has a lot to do with energy and this preservation of nuclear, which is the most profoundly anti-democratic technology that we've ever seen, really, is totally bound up in that. And Danny, just for amusement, when you mentioned the too cheap to meter thing, we actually now have energy in this country that's too cheap to meter. It's windmills in Texas, of all places, because in the winter now, at night, the windmills in West Texas are so powerful. They're pouring so much electricity into the grid that the utilities are actually giving it away at night. You can do your wash and charge your car and run your computer at night in Texas for free because they got to deal with the electricity. So, that's full circle. And when we talk about preservation of democracy, which is such a profound issue, we really need to deal with the energy dimension. Shut these nuclear plants, shut off coal and gas and oil, and make the flip, especially to rooftop solar.
Linda, you wanted to add something?
Yeah. But back to what Harvey just said, I think that the core issue here isn't is the fact that this world is imploding right now, it's the corporations against life, basically. And that our struggle right now is to really think about this in terms of like, we are fighting for life itself on Earth, not just human life, but all life on Earth is in danger right now. And it's because of the rape and pillage and extractive economy that we have been, that has been our model since the beginning of the industrial age. And so we're coming to a moment, and maybe we're already at that moment, but we don't recognize it yet, of the complete unraveling of our institutions, and in that, this corporate hegemony is fighting with all of its power to stay where it is, because the corporate hegemony has no conscience. The corporate hegemony is there for one reason, and that is to make profit. And so what we have to represent is life, is the future generations, not the books, not the profit and loss statements, but the fact that life itself on this incredible planet is in danger of not existing anymore. And we turn our backs to that. We don't talk about it because it's a big downer for people. But that we need to talk about it. And I think that's why the young people are having a hard time becoming engaged right now, because of this incredibly present threat of no more future generations.
John, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, I do. Linda, thank you. And Jim, once again, if we could just get what Linda said in those 2 or 3 minutes as a standalone video, I think it could really serve us and this Code Red for Democracy, Code Red for Climate movement that we're discussing. That brings in all of the other social justice issues that so many of you have spent your lives working on. But Linda,
George has been
thank you.
trying to
That was
talk,
just
but
such
he's
a-
still muted.
That was just
Well,
a stunning short statement. Thank you.
and
Thank
it
you.
reminds me, having come from a woman, I will say that I've got a book now called The People's Sparrow of U.S. History, and I will contend that the most profound shift in power towards democracy in this world today is the shift of power from men to women. And if you see what really gets these right wingers crazy, that's why Roe v. Wade is so critical. And the shift away, most of the indigenous tribes in North America were matriarchies. They were run by the women, and we are now seeing, this. There's a great line. An Iroquois woman was asked on a documentary, why was it that if the women ran the tribes, the men were the chiefs? And she said, well, it gives them something to do, and it makes them feel important. And but the most critical transition we're now in actually is away from patriarchy and to matriarchy, and to the part of our species that can understand reproduction and the needs of the planet Earth. So I think we need to keep that in mind as we move ahead.
So we've done a great job, a really fine job of articulating the issues that we have. And we started talking about some of the organizations that people who are listening and watching this broadcast can reach out to, perhaps participate in, volunteer for, and so forth. I still want to know, and Danny, I understand your history of the effort of getting people involved, but we have less than 150 days before what may very well be the most essential election in the history of the United States. Because in truth, as we all know, if we lose the House and the Senate in 2022. The rest is game over to a large extent. We'll be shooting uphill at with blanks. So what else can we do? What else can we do to engage the population? We know what happened with the Vietnam War. We know what happened with the Watergate thing. But at that point, we had Republicans who were actually willing to speak the truth. And that's how we avoided this circumstance in Nixon's age. What do we do today? What else, I should say, do we do? Danny?
Well, I think that one of the most important things that has to get done, we keep on saying it almost every day, at least a couple of times, is that it's absolutely essential that the Justice Department prosecute and convict Trump of insurrection. Because it's one of the very few statutes that he can be convicted of that disqualify him for running for public office. Now this sounds contradictory to our theories of democracy, because one of the reasons why people don't want him to run and want him to be prosecuted and convicted is because they're afraid he'll win. In that our institutions of democracy are so distorted that as we all know, that of 27 states in our country elect 52 of the United States senators. And that those 27 states have only 18% of the population in the entire country in those states. So there's this totally distorted aspect to the exercise of democracy in our country. And the problem is to try to undo that imbalance is going to require a constitutional amendment. Because of the effect of the Hamiltonians in setting up the Constitution. They intentionally weighted the democratic process toward these smaller states and the less population. So we need to have a massive movement in the country to not only the citizens to rise up and to demand the prosecution of Trump, but we need to also mobilize a major movement to try to get them to amend the Constitution so that this imbalance doesn't occur, so that there's a popular election of the president, that the number of people who vote for the president in the country is what determines who the president's going to be. For example, there are a certain number of these things. Now, you point out rightly, George, that we've got only 150 days or something left to do this. That's why I think the Democratic Party right now, the New York Times, I guess it was just a few weeks ago, a Sunday Times, big front page article about, isn't it obviously clear that Biden isn't going to be an adequately strong president, for a second term. And they're starting to flounder around about who's going to be the nominee if, in fact, Biden is not. The negative pregnant of that is that they don't trust Kamala Harris to be able to beat Donald Trump. We need to adjust the dynamic that's going on now. I think we have to try to mobilize a major progressive energy in the country to sustain and support the progressive people in Congress, and the primary points are almost over now. The primaries are just coming to a conclusion now of who the candidates are going to be in November. But we've got to get behind trying to maintain control of the House and Senate, even if it's by, we've got a majority of 5 in the House of Representatives now, in a tie in the United States Senate. So, but we've got to try to mobilize and hold the House and the Senate as a major immediate tactic that has to be done now. And then we have to get busy on trying to not only increase the margin in 2024, but both take steps to keep Trump from being the nominee, and also figure out if, in fact, we're going to shift to another president, get someone who can mobilize right away to support progressive change in the country. Now, as I've talked to people before, is that people don't realize this, but the forces behind Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are critical to this. And the young people are going to be supportive of younger candidates. And that's what we need to do. We need to hold the House and Senate immediately in this fall. Then we have to get busy on trying to shift over to younger candidates in 2024 that support progressive change. This is a 2-3 year, almost 2.5 year campaign we have to engage in right now and know what our objectives are.
Right, and we really have to take over the Democratic Party.
Yes.
There has to be a generational shift in the Democratic Party, led by the young people. We just saw it fought out in the primary in South Texas there, where Pelosi and Schumer waltz in and support an anti-life, pro-corporate candidate who wins by less than 1,000 votes. This is the major shift that's happening. The Democratic Party needs to be moved over, needs to be taken over. The Progressive Caucus is now the biggest caucus in the Congress. I think we have a reasonable chance of holding the Senate, but it's gerrymandering in the House that is killing us. People want to get into the deep weeds on this. Please join our Monday Zoom calls. We're coming up on number 100, and Tatanka is a co-convener, and Danny and Linda have been participants. We talk about both energy and protecting our elections. It's at 5 p.m. Eastern time, 2 p.m. Pacific time. Write me directly, solartopia@gmail.com, and I'll send you the link and also a PDF of my People's Spiral of U.S. History. I do want to jump in very quickly and say there's a huge election, not much we can do about it, but maybe a little bit in Brazil coming up, where which is the biggest country in South America, where you have an absolutely abominable fascist running the country who has said that he will not abide by the election results if he loses. But that election is this fall. We need to follow it. And we have just won a major victory in Colombia, and much of Latin America now has moved left. But so there is hope. When a door closes, a window opens. But our number one task in this country now is to move the Democratic Party to become an apparatus for social change. They talk about socialism. What we're talking about is Medicare for all, protecting the environment, protecting women's rights, virtually everything that the progressive left supports in this country is supported by a majority of the country. A majority of the country wants Trump indicted. A majority of the country wants Medicare for all, wants green energy, wants a woman's right to choose. We are in the majority, and not only in the majority, we are on the side of a profoundly prosperous economy. We could actually argue for a free market in many of the things that we support in this country. So we are on the side of history here. We have to move the Democratic Party, for God's sakes, to also be on the side of history. We don't need a governor of California supporting nuclear power, for God's sakes, or standing in the way of Medicare for all or a Green New Deal. So it's a generational, it's a gender transition, and God knows we have to make it or we're not going to survive. So come to our grassroots emergency election protection coalition meetings 2 p.m. Pacific time on Mondays. Contact me, solartopia@gmail, and it's an honor to be with all of you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I was late. It was a mix-up on the scheduling, but you are a great group, and I hope you'll have us back. And I'm so thrilled that Danny and Linda and Tatanka came on with us. And John Steiner, I haven't seen you for years. Great to see you.
Not since you were last out here in Colorado for the World Affairs Conference. Danny, I want to follow up on something you said and put in a plug for an organization which actually kicked off our very first day of our very first week of the Democracy Dialogues, namely the Movement Action Project. Is that right? No, Movement Voter Project with Billy Wimsatt. They are doing at a grassroots organizing, get out the vote level, exactly what you're talking about. And you probably know them and know of them. There are so many groups in this country that are funneling money to progressive, long-term organizing efforts on the ground, who know how to get their people out to vote, navigate voter suppression, and get them to the polls. But
Mhm.
Movement Voter Project is one group we can all support.
That's right. That is absolutely right.
Kit?
I want to underscore what John said. There are groups, most people don't realize that the Democratic Party has never and is not now supporting relational grassroots organizing. The work that saved our country in the Georgia runoff was done all with grassroots, no help from the Democratic Party. And everybody, we were totally for Stacey Abrams, wants her, to win, and she's doing a great job. But no Democratic money of the Democratic Party goes to this. So it's really important that people understand that and support it. I put in the chat the RomeroInstitute.org to get more information on this, and greencal.org, which is the Let's Green California campaign that we've been talking about and we're running in California. The names Ray McClendon and Andrea Miller, which have converted the Georgia Miracle into a Georgian Way book and movie. And now Ray, who is director of NAACP for Greater Atlanta, is director of the entire all of Georgia GOP campaign. The New Progressive Action campaign, and how you can reach Drew Glover there. And it's the second Thursday of every month is our meeting. I have a weekly, please show up at Carvey's 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. It is an amazing Zoom call every Monday, the Green Group call. And if any of you are interested in our Circle of 100 meets each Wednesday evening, and we have Danny on, Dolores is on virtually every meeting. We have the organizers, Ben Eichert, who's an amazing union organizer, who's head of the state campaign for Romero, Camila Chavez, who works with Dolores. It's just an amazing group of people. And so we report on the campaign, and right now we're in the middle of everybody telling their journey story, Sarah, Danny, et cetera, Dolores, how they got to where they got and what decisions they made, what life experience they have, what values they have, and even delve into their spiritual journey. So welcome you all. And thank you for inviting us. This is wonderful. Great to see everyone.
Yeah, have us back when I get the time right, please.
You know what? I should have told you, because you told me 9 and I happened to read what was sent out and it was 8 and supposed to be on. And so when I kept telling you I haven't gotten the thing yet, I thought you knew, but sorry.
I should probably stop taking LSD.
Hey, Harvey, I can't resist. You're coming in a little later, gave a few other people some time to talk.
Given that there's such great people, I'm more than happy to.
Well, thank you all so much. This has been marvelous. George, you want to just say a quick word about tomorrow?
Yeah, tomorrow is an interesting day based on today, in that we're going to be dealing with 3 major activist groups. Joan Blades, who started Move On, Leah Greenberg, who was one of the co-founders of Indivisible, and Shannon
Gallagher, who some of you know and don't, runs something called Unpack, and basically working with young citizen voters to make shifts in our democracy. UN-PAC Shana Gallagher. She and her team worked for a year in West Virginia and Arizona, trying to change those 2 Senate votes. And they're now working in 5 other states, including Pennsylvania, to do what they can for the elections in the fall.
So the point is that today, a number of you mentioned, Danny, you talked about it. There are key issues, i.e. the Justice Department acting to bring these lawless fools to justice. And what I don't understand is why we can't get every activist group in America to support we the people turning out and demanding the Justice Department do that. So if there are any more issues like this that we think can galvanize a large number of voices and can advance the game, let's see what we can do about that. That would be go ahead, Kit.
Just very, very quickly, at a future thing, invite Danny back to talk about a strategy which we're not unveiling yet, but it uses RICO to pierce the corporate veil on the extractive industries.
Terrific. We will do that.
Terrific.
Jim?
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Kit, we'll take you up on it. Danny, let's confer. I would love Romero to convene a whole week program on Humanity Rising, laying out the strategy within the context of the kind of citizen people's mobilization that you've been talking about, and I know is so passionate for George. So I'll be in touch separately about that. And Harvey and Linda, I want to just acknowledge that you brought in nuclear power. That was where I kind of cut my teeth after the Vietnam War, along with many people in the anti-nuke movement. And it's been kind of a sleeper. And now they're trying to bring it back with real force and cynicism. And we need to understand that that's a major front, given the consequences of what will take place once one of these things comes down, remembering 3 Mile Island and Fukuyama, Chernobyl, and so forth. So thank you, Harvey, for bringing that in, and Linda, and would love to have a whole program on nuclear issues and solar power and so forth on Humanity Rising, because that's what we're trying to do to empower humanity to rise, is bring the issues and the people that you all are carrying so passionately to the fore and to a global audience, so more people can be informed. So this has been splendid discussion today. It's been exciting, and most fundamentally, it's been inspiring to all of us at a time when we need all the hope we can get, given
Well, you gotta
the
remember,
news every day.
you got to remember, Jim, in 1974, people who despair, the idea that you can't defeat City Hall is a myth perpetrated by City Hall. When we started in 1974 on No Nukes, and this T-shirt, by the way, is about 50 years old. When we started, that nobody gave
like
us
it.
snowball's chance. And in fact, in 1974, Richard Nixon said there would be 1,000 nuclear reactors in the United States in the year 2000. In the year 2000, there were 104. So somewhere along the line, we stopped 896 atomic reactors.
Yeah.
And now, just as Tatanka has mentioned, relational organizing. The battle on nuclear power now is reactor by reactor. It is not a generic issue anymore. It is, number one, shutting each individual reactor as we go along, and it's solar panel by solar panel. We got to get these panels on the rooftops. And in every instance, the economic and the job issues are on our side, as is public opinion. And the same is with democracy and indicting Trump and Medicare for all. We have the public. That's the number one saving grace in America today. Preventing fascism in this country is the fact that the public is with us. And if we can get the Democratic Party either out of the way or on the right direction, we can save ourselves. So let's do it.
Let's do it. Thank you,
Jim.
everyone.
Si se puede.
Great, you guys.
Danny,
Thank you.
did you want to add something?
No, I'm happy. I'm happy.
You're
You
happy?
called me. I'm
You're
happy.
happy. We're all happy. Thank you, everyone. You're all
Thanks.
welcome to the after session chat group. You'll see the link in the chat box. This has been so inspiring. I love you guys, and look forward to having you more down the road.
Okay.
That's it for us today, everyone. Bye for now.
Great
In
game.
Se puede.
the instance of sanity, how do I get on the after chat?
It's in the chat, Harvey.
Right
Look
there.
in the
Just go
chat.
to
There's a link.
the chat box right now and click on the after chat.
Do I need to get my younger daughter to help me to do this here? Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you very much.
All right.